Hello, good evening. Oh, there we go. That'll slow down. Welcome. It's such a pleasure to see you all here. So this is our first. When I penciled this into my diary like a few months ago, I thought, let's do the sex and parenting thing. And you can't advertise it as that because it gets filtered out of everything. But those are sort of, and we've broadened it out because that isn't the only thing that I don't know how to have the conversations with my little girl about. I did some sermon at church last term sometime about sex and marriage and things like that, and I thought a whole bunch of things that I had to find out about and think about were nothing to do with church, were just about what our kids were facing at the minute and what I didn't know about what they were going through. And I'm aware that I grew up, my parents hadn't had to work out a policy on WhatsApp, right? I just had to argue with my mum about how long I was on the phone, and she was tripping over the wire. It was another, we don't know, we haven't had to work this out. So I thought, let us find some people who can help us work this stuff out a bit better and work it out with each other about all those awkward conversations, because not thinking about it is not helping. So we thought we'd put this on. This is not a Jesus thing or a church thing. This is a thing we thought we have chairs and microphones and an opportunity to bless Calverley and say, we're stuck. Who else is stuck? So rather than any content about what you should be telling your kids, that's not my business, but how do you keep talking to them and what are they facing? So it's, not a moralistic thing. We just thought we'd be able to get together and help. That's me. I'm the vicar here. If you don't know me, I'm Rob. I've been here about 3.5 years. Before that, I used to be a maths teacher, but I was weirdly seemed to be the only shameless teacher in most schools that I was in. So I was also the sex education teacher, or one of them, at a whole bunch of schools in Switzerland, in Rwanda, in Canada. I've done sex education in Benton Park, and I'm hoping it's a better curriculum than I was involved with. So I have some wisdom from that, but these two have much more. This is Kate, who you might know is the head teacher just next door, Kate Cameron, and Sarah Morris, I want to say, who can introduce herself. She's going to talk to us for about 40 minutes and give us some input. We'll stop and our brains will melt and we'll go, okay, what do I need to ask? And we've got a chance then for more tea and coffee and biscuits and to look at the resources that Sarah has brought with us to see if that sparks stuff, and then to write down any questions, and whatever questions you've got, we, by which I largely don't mean me, will try and answer according to who's got the most wisdom. And I don't know if this is a one-off thing that we're doing or we'll unpack a thing, go, oh, we need to do this all the time and look at these topics. So whatever you've got, whatever questions you've got, even if we haven't got answers, it'll do us good to know what the questions are together. So with no further ado, Sarah, would you talk to us a bit about, tell us who you are and then tell us what we need to know about what our kids are facing.
Yikes. Right, first of all, is the microphone working? Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'll tell you a little bit about me so you'll understand why I've been asked to come and do this. Because I couldn't find anybody else. No, that's not true. So I have 16, 17 years experience of working in student support in both primary and secondary schools. I also do private work with students who are finding it hard to attend school for a variety of reasons. I also work outside the box in Ilkley, if you've heard of that, supporting adults with learning disabilities and autism. And I think I began my journey into this kind of work probably in about 1999, 2000, when I did my first counselling course. Lovely Lizzie there has been a lifelong friend, 21 years now. So what I have found in my time in schools what I've done is worked with children who are struggling for whatever reason. Could have been academically, but usually actually if they're struggling academically, it might be socially as well. My last role in a school was at Prince Henry's in Otley, if anybody's aware of that. So secondary school in the area. So very much sort of on the front line with the sort of puberty age children going through what they're going through. Can I just have a hands up for who's got children at primary? Who's got children at secondary? So you'll all have children going to secondary. Who's got girls and boys? Who's got just girls? Who's got just boys? Welcome to my team, but just boys people. Okay, so some of the information I'm going to give you are not information. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, some is from training and information. Some is from actual experience in the schools. Some is from my private clients, and some is as being a mum to a single parent to 2 teenage boys myself. Well, they're 18 and 21 now. So it will be, and I will tell you where that information's come from so you know. Again, I'm going to say I'm not here to lecture you. I'm just here because obviously I've had the, if you want to say, the ability to sit alongside children who are struggling and kind of hear, they'll quite often say to somebody they don't know as well, actually what's going on for them. And I've also seen the kind of positives and negatives of different kind of relationships at home, different kind of friendships. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a few just kind of figures. This is not to scare you. It's just so that you kind of understand a little bit about what's going on with our children figures-wise. So some of it might be about porn, but we've got to talk about it if we've got teenagers and younger. Some of it might be about just accessing online. Some of it might be about gender. So these are just a few little, and they're all UK, the most recent I could find. So studies in the UK indicate that children typically began accessing pornography around the age of 11. That does not mean all your 11-year-olds are now accessing pornography, but it's just a little, you know. Yeah, okay. So this is about gender. In the United Kingdom, research indicates that children may start questioning their gender identity at various ages, often between 5 and 12 years old. Studies have shown that approximately 1% of children in the UK identify as transgender or gender non-conforming. So that's another issue really, isn't it? That's out there in the landscape as well, helping our children with that, understand that, and with that. So this is about kind of online access and what our children are seeing and reading and being sort of exposed to. So a study by the NSPCC has revealed that 1 in 25 children reveal unwanted sexual solicitations online, which I think's frightening, really. According to a report by Watch, the UK hosted 3% of global URLs, you know what I mean by that, don't you? Yeah, websites that contained information that you wouldn't want your child to see. And the NSPCC also states that 42% of children between the ages of 11 and 17 have been exposed to online pornography. So please don't all be frightened at this point. We're going to talk about, because that can be, what they're describing as pornography can be just something you wouldn't want your 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old child to see. If we think about that, I suppose what the difference is, and Rob was talking about it, is that our children now, parenting, the landscape is really difficult because they have phones, they have iPads, some of them have iPads for school, and they're online, gaming, and there's lots and lots and lots of ways in which they can access online material, and our job is to try and manage that and keep them safe, and quite often that's really quite difficult to do because the people wanting them to see this stuff find ways of getting through. So that's something else I'm going to talk about as well. So the reason why I just read those out is it's not to frighten you, it's just to say that I think it's sometimes quite easy to think, oh, not in my house, not at our school, we live in a nice area, so on and so forth. All of which can be true, but actually it doesn't make much difference stats-wise to what our children are accessing. What makes a difference is you guys and their peers and school, but mostly you guys, and how you're going to help and support your children having these difficult conversations about these difficult topics. So, children, does anybody know what age you should be to be on WhatsApp?
14.
Yeah, okay. So, does anybody, I mean, you don't have to put your hands up, but we will have children under that age who are on it because peer pressure and all of this sort of thing. So the first thing I guess I want to talk about is thinking about that. Just thinking about use of mobile phones. And this is not a judgment on anybody because there's lots of it. Usually, actually, a lot of people buy their child a mobile phone when they go to secondary school. A lot of people do that. That's completely understandable because everybody else has got one. Or if you've got a child in year 5 or 6 who is now walking on their own, you might buy them a mobile phone. They probably have a gaming console, they nearly all do, don't they? And they might have iPads. So, okay. First things first, I'm sure you all do this already. It's using your home Wi-Fi to put secure controls in place. Does everybody know about that? Can you do that on your Wi-Fi? You can go into settings and pick and choose. If not, look into that because your children are very clever. They can bypass it. But most Wi-Fi providers will have some kind of, mine's got something called Safe House, and I can actually, I don't anymore because they're old, get into everybody's device and control what they're allowed to see. Why do I need to do that? Well, because we can tell our children not to look at things, but we all know that they'll go, oh, my friend told me to look at this. It's not about them being naughty or bad. It's just about them being kind of, oh, I'll have a look at that. And then not realising actually where they might end up. I think that we have become a little bit frightened to say no. We've become a little bit frightened to be the parent that's saying, I don't care what your friends are doing, you're not going on there. And have those conversations, or to take the phones off at night. Now, up to the age of 16, I took both of my boys' phones off them when they went to bed at night. That's not me being a better parent, that's just what I did. Because it felt like I wanted to keep them safe, and at least during that time, I knew they weren't on their phones. I also let them know that I would look at the phones and what they've been on, which some people might say is an abuse of their privacy. What I would say in counter to that is that unfortunately with the onset of mobile phones and iPads, for our younger children, especially those under 16, maybe that has to be. But it's up to you as parents to decide. What I would say is that you can never really know what's going on if you've not got eyes on their phones. If you just assume it's all okay, if they say, yeah, mum, yeah, dad, I'm not doing that, that might not be true, and it not be, again, then not because they're being terribly naughty. Somebody might have sent them something. They might, the thing we always get, don't press on a link. Well, they do, don't they? They press on a link, and before you know it, they've opened up a whole world of things. We see stories again and again, don't we, in the media about children who have ended up in some kind of abusive relationship online, or of seeing things they shouldn't have been seeing, or have gone to meet somebody that they met online. How has that all happened without anybody knowing? So sometimes it just does, doesn't it? And there's nothing anybody could have done. But I always think that for you, being brave and being prepared to be, if you want, the bad person, and saying, absolutely not, I'm keeping you safe, is quite important, because it's to remember those stories. Not every child that's going to happen to, but remember those stories that what could have made a difference was, were you keeping more of an eye on what they were on online? No, they don't like it. Absolutely they don't. No, you will be the worst parent in the world. All of those conversations. But I'm kind of thinking to myself, I'd rather have been the worst parent in the world than be the parent picking up that mess. That's for me. You have your own journey and your own decisions to make. It's worth having a really grown-up conversation with your children, no matter what age they are, actually. Because we tend to think, oh, they're only, don't we, whatever age they are. Newsflash, they'll be listening to people at school whose parents aren't quite as careful, so they'll be getting information that you don't know about. So the more you can keep your channels open, the safer, the better. Because they'll be reading things, they'll be seeing things, they'll be curious. They are curious, aren't they? And they might not be looking for what they end up finding. There are some apps out there, I don't know if you guys know any of them, that kind of are purposeful to kind of be hidden on the phone and are not safe for your children to be using. So again, you need to be looking at your child's front screen to see what, what's it called? Identification things they've got on there. You can find, I've put some information out, you'll find it later, about keeping safe online, but you can check your child's apps and see what they've got, because they can download something in 30 seconds that you don't know they've got. It does seem heavy-handed, but I think that one of the only ways of really keeping especially our younger people safe online is for that phone or that iPad to be a kind of joint enterprise, and you are jointly looking at what's on it and making sure it's okay for them. Once mine got past 16, I didn't do that anymore, because I sort of thought, well, they're 16 and they have the phones. But up until that point, I did feel like I had a responsibility. I've never been bothered about being the parent who said, no, you can't do that, because for every time that you give in, if it feels bad to you, if you feel to yourself inside, I wouldn't do that, I'm not happy with that, my parenting doesn't align with that, and you just end up giving in because so-and-so says their mum does, so-and-so said their dad, you go with your feeling. What's your parenting style? What do you want to do? You've got to go with how you feel and not with what so-and-so, because actually half the time they're not telling you the truth anyway. Everybody else in the class does this. Not true. Not true at all. And as sort of examples, I cannot even begin to tell you the number of times we had to unpick things that had happened between children online when I worked at Prince Henry's. Just again and again, it was all on the phone. The parents knew nothing about it. Nobody knew this conversation was going on. Nobody knew these apps were there. Nobody knew. And it could get quite serious, police involvement, all sorts of things. Young girls going off to meet somebody. It doesn't even need to be that. It can be bullying, can't it? We know about that. We've heard about bullying, because when I was at school, you said something a bit mean, you went home, everybody forgot about it, you came back the next day, we'd all moved on. Our poor children, somebody says something, and then that evening it's all over the phone, which is another good reason to be looking, even at messages, because then you can nip something in the bud. Oh, what's going on here? What's been happening here? Because probably, I don't know if we did. Years ago, we might have gone home and talked about it more because we didn't have the option for it all to be on a phone or an iPad. But now, of course, it's this little secret world, isn't it? It's this secret world where we don't know what they're doing. Actually, as a parent, you have a right. You do have a right to know what's going on. And also, I think you kind of have a responsibility. I don't like to use that word, but, in order to keep your child safe and not get that dreaded knock on the door, or not know where they are, or not know who they're talking to, it does kind of, you do have to kind of play bad cop sometimes, I feel. Some of you might feel really happy with that. Yep, I'm all over that. I'm taking the phone off them on an evening, I don't mind. Or they're not having a phone till a certain age. If you decide that your child can have a phone, absolutely good for you. It's just about making sure they're safe on it, isn't it? That's what it's about. It's not about not having it. It's like a bit like saying, no, you can't go skiing because you might break your leg. Well, of course you might, but if you're taught properly, you won't. So you can use any kind of analogy for having a phone is just a piece of equipment you need to keep your child safe on. Because, like I said, when I was at all the schools I was at, but mostly at Prince Henry's because it was the older children, it was nearly every day. And it took so much time unpicking these scenarios. And actually they would come into school, these scenarios, and of course it all happened out of school. On an evening with the and that sort of believing what's being said and not having a conversation, just sort of reading a message and then believing that about themselves or about somebody else, so nobody's there to sort of call that out. So if you're there to go, well, that's not true, don't you? So it might feel really uncomfortable, but it's something to really think about is, how, rather than just trusting your child to be safe, perhaps sometimes they're not always able to do that. Think about your average teenager. Their brain's all over the place, isn't it? So they don't always make sensible decisions. They don't do what we think they should do, not because they can't be bothered, just because the head goes, oh, yeah, no, that'll be a laugh. And the younger children are very, very susceptible because their friend says something and they go, oh, right, yeah, that. So I can't really... Now, online gaming, that's the other one, isn't it? When your child's got a headset on, if you can't hear what's going on, of course, if they're on these servers like Discord, anybody heard of Discord servers? Yeah, they are chatting to people all over the world. So this is not about being really frightening. It's just about kind of saying, just be mindful of all of that. I once had to say to a young lady who'd it was very funny, made a YouTube video at one of my old schools I worked at about all of the staff and posted it online, so we all saw it. It was really funny. And we played it to her in the headmaster's office, and she looked shocked. Because she said, well, I just did that in my bedroom. And she genuinely hadn't understood that when she posted something onto YouTube, the whole world could see it. But I said to her, do you know what www means? World Wide Web. That could have gone anywhere. She had no idea. So it's honestly sometimes something as simple as that, because especially for the younger children, they honestly believe, I've posted it, so I can see it, and maybe my friend, whoever. No. Anybody and everybody can get to that now. So it's just kind of, perhaps we sometimes assume they know those things and they don't know those things. And actually, I think sometimes I need to learn. So you can sit down as a family and go, let's look into that. Let's find out about that. But like I said, there's some information out there. Loads and loads and loads of charities have got loads of information online. NSPCC have got absolutely loads of stuff. You can send off for it. You can look online if you don't just want to read, if you want to sit and read it together. So another thing I really wanted to talk about was, so if we think about the other awkward conversations, so let's think about sex or puberty and sex, because we've got younger ones, we've got older ones. Oh, it's really awkward, isn't it? Majority of kids say, I don't want to talk to you about that. You know. I would say that some of the things that young people told me when I was working in schools, I would be heartbroken if I thought my sons were going in and talking to somebody about that. No, they don't always want to talk to you, and God, it's awkward, isn't it? Yeah, I've got 2 sons. And so that's an interesting one, because I've had to do the kind of what would generally be a dad talk, but mum. What I would say again is just don't be afraid. It's better. Would you rather have an awkward conversation than have a much more awkward conversation when something goes wrong? When they're learning at school, it's too easy, I would say this, for everybody to go, well, school should be teaching them that. School teach biological facts, biology. School also teach our PHSCE, so relationships, they do. But your average class of 30, half of them will be giggling, half of them won't be listening. If you do listen, you're going to get pulled up by your friends. So the information that they should really be taking in, they're not really properly taking in. So they will obviously get some of it, but they're all a bit, would you say that's...
There's a gap, I'd say, between what they can say in lessons and what they do in their lives.
Yes, there is, yeah. And also, everybody's family is different, isn't it? Everybody's family is different, so you've got to kind of deliver a lesson that covers the facts, but then everybody's family is different. And you have a right to deliver that information, as again, like I said, as fits your family, But the worst thing is no delivering of any information, because then your child is sort of swimming around, listening to a friend who've said they've done this, listening to that, reading a bit of this online, picking up that. Modelling behaviour. So one of the things that frightens me the most is that I think with young ladies, often people are in a rush to talk to them about this thing because they think pregnancy. And with young men, they don't think that. And there's a distinct kind of mismatch there where the young men aren't really getting the conversation. Who are the role models for our young people now? Who are the role models for relationships? Somebody said to me recently, who are the role models, famous role models for young men? Andrew Tate? I mean, that's horrendous, isn't it? But if you're not talking to your son about these things, who is? And we know the bravado at school. Oh, yeah, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, I'm not buying her flowers. I'm not doing this. Oh, she's done that. He's done this. Again, it's like a soap opera played out, except it isn't, is it? Because it's real life. And that's what they're experiencing. We know that young people access porn. It might not be terrible, but it might not be what you want them to watch. Maybe less about them accessing it, more about, again, if you're not having a conversation about loving, consensual, boundaried relationships, and they're just watching something, how are they learning that? You know, our children learn by being modelled. So a caring, loving relationship, you might be showing them that. The difficulty comes for the next step, doesn't it? Sitting down with your 12-year-old, your 14-year-old, even your 9-year-old, whatever, and having those conversations is tricky because there's the biological side, of course. We can explain to them what happens, what goes where, and what the outcome is. But actually, the bigger issue is the feelings, the boundaries, the behaviour, how our young people feel in relationships. When I was working at school, it frightened me the amount of young people who would come and talk to me about really what I would call unsafe relationships, not boundaried. But they didn't seem to see it like that, which frightened me even more. Or they were kind of thinking, oh, that's normal. Because in the absence of having any conversation about it, these slightly abusive relationships would be occurring. Not all, obviously. So I think that, you know, one of the things I've done as a mum is just been brave and spoken to my boys. And did they go, oh, I don't want to? Yeah, of course they did. They didn't go, yes, Mum, I can't think of anything I'd rather do than sit down with you and talk about sex. That sounds fantastic. But I just put my big girl pants on and thought, I'm their mum. It's my job. It isn't anybody else's job. I've got to talk to them about, especially boys, I've got to talk to them about loving and caring and how there's much more to a relationship than sex, and, you know, consent and boundaries and actually taking care of themselves so they don't put themselves in an awkward position, because boys, you know, are very, very vulnerable, completely differently to girls. So if you've got boys and girls, you need to parent very differently, don't you? You know, how you're looking after them. Because our young men, you know, have to be very, very careful now, because yes, it's right that girls are able to speak up, but then it makes our boys very vulnerable. And actually, I know my 21-year-old is just really anxious all the time about getting into any kind of relationship in case somebody accuses him of something. He's really petrified, which is so sad. So I think it's about that. It's about thinking about your child, the way they learn. You know, how do they learn? So do they want to just sit and talk to you? Would you watch something together? Would you read something together? You don't have to sit and do 2 hours. I often find they're never going to do that. They're not going to sit opposite you and go, yeah, okay then. It can be, you could be watching a bit of something together and something could come on and it could just spark a little 5-minute conversation. Or you could be driving in the car somewhere. I always found my boys talk to me more when they're side by side, not face on. It doesn't feel like a lecture. And something comes up and that sparks another little 5, 10, 15 minute. It doesn't need to be you sat opposite them feeling dreadful and them sat opposite you thinking, oh, I'm not going to listen to this. It's kind of like finding those little moments. Although I have left some bits and pieces out, I would advise against just bunging a book under your son's door or your daughter's door and going, there you go, love. Because I think what that then does is it's your problem and I don't really want to talk about it, and it creates that. Even, you know, it's never going to be not embarrassing, is it? It's never going to be not embarrassing. But, you know, hey, we all do it. We all go through puberty, our body changes. And I think it's less about sort of lecturing and saying how you were, because, of course, generationally, when I think about what my mum said to me, was very Victorian, and what her mum probably said to her. So it's kind of trying to move with the times while also safeguarding your young person, because that's what you're doing. You're safeguarding your young person from being hurt or from hurting somebody else unintentionally, because they're not quite sure of what boundaries are. So yeah, it's awkward as hell, but hey, you know, just go for it. And like I said, it can be watching a programme where there's a bit of an embarrassing scene that you might all normally kind of through, but you could just bring up a conversation. So it's not about having to sit there. I think that if you have teenagers, likelihood is, if they are accessing porn, I don't know, that might be something that you think is a hard no, they shouldn't be doing that. It might be something that you feel able to have a conversation about. I'm just putting that out there as a don't say to yourself, no, they would never do that. You know, they might just be watching, you know, something really, really, really innocuous. It doesn't have to be terrible, does it? It's the far end of the scale. But do you want to have conversations about that? Because the only danger I would say is there's lots and lots of information actually out now, but our young people are not starting sexual relationships as early as we did, because it's all online, so they talk to each other on the phone instead. But that's when things can end up being online and misinformation and seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing, or thinking that all sex looks like some kind of awful porno film, which we really don't want our young. So again, is it easier to have the awkward conversation than it is unpick that when they've looked at something really, really unsavoury? So it's scary, it's embarrassing. I'm not pretending it's none of those things. It absolutely is. I often had young people come to me and say, can I ask you something, miss? When they ever said that, I'd think, oh God, I know what it's going to be. But I always said, yes, of course. Because in my book, if they weren't talking to somebody else, they needed to talk, they needed to say something to somebody. But I always wished it was their mum or their carer or their dad or their gran or their granddad or their auntie or their uncle or somebody in the family they were talking to. It kind of always felt slightly wrong that it'd be me about something like that. Just to give you a bit of insight, I spoke to my 18-year-old last night and said, right, I'm going to go speak to these parents, so I'm going to get it from the horse's mouth. Talk to me about what your experience with me as a parent is. What do you think, do you think, oh God, I wouldn't talk to you? And he said, well, I wouldn't talk to my dad. Oh God, no. But I would talk to you. She's laughing because she knows. Yes, exactly. Oh my God, don't talk to me about that. But I would talk to you, Mum. But he said, but I would also talk to just 2 close friends. But he did say, and this was really interesting, but I would also be mindful to take what they said, not with a pinch of salt, but know that everybody's experience is different and they bring their own bias into it. So, if our children are quite vulnerable, and one person says this, oh yeah, another person says that. It's that understanding that everybody brings their own background, their own journey, how they've been parented, what they've seen in front of them, what they have watched, what they've been allowed to watch. So all of this information they're getting from friends or online, you're kind of the voice of reason in all that. Because of course they're going to get all that. And you're not going to say, oh, your friend's talking crap, that's all crap, but it's kind of being the voice of reason and allowing them to feel like they can say the stuff to you that's difficult. Allowing them to feel like, because if you're just going to say, oh, we're not going to talk about that because that shuts it down, it stops any possibility of anybody kind of opening up, doesn't it? And it feels, like I said, it feels hard. You can even buy them a journal. I put some ideas out there. Buy a little journal. If they're really against talking, that they could put thoughts down if they want to share them with you. That way, again, I think it's about knowing your young people. I don't know your young people. You might say, oh yeah, my son or daughter would want to draw something, they'd write in a journal, or they'd just sit and talk to me. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, does it? As long as you do it. I would say that there are lots of websites, and please do access them, but I'd be sort of tempted to try and have the conversations rather than go, oh, just look at that website, because we're then kind of going straight down the path of everything's online, and it's not relational, because your relationship with your children, every single one of you in this room, will parent slightly differently. That I know, but I also know that every single one of you in this room wants your children to be safe. So regardless of how you parent, regardless of what your moral code is, regardless of what your personal standards are for when they do certain things, bottom line is you want your children to be safe. Yeah, so it's then up to you and whoever you're parenting alongside, or whether it's just you, to kind of decide what that's going to look like. But I think that it's almost sometimes the inaction. If you're so frightened by having the difficult conversation that you don't have it, that's where the gaps creep in, and our children kind of, when we were young, there wasn't really, your friends would ask you all sorts, wouldn't they? I remember there was a girl in my class at high school, and she'd apparently done it with everybody, and she used to come round and ask me questions, and I didn't know what she meant when she asked me them, so I didn't know whether I should say yes or no, because I thought, so if I say yes, do I look terrible? If I say no, do I look terrible? I don't know what she's asking me. There's no idea. And that was about the limit of our exposure to that sort of thing. But I think my mum was quite old-fashioned and gave me the kind of indication that I should be like a Victorian lady and submit, and just put up with it, which was not really very helpful. It's not going to work just saying, just don't do it, is it? So I think the thing to go home and do is think about how you want to parent these difficult situations. Think about what conversations you want to have or how you want to do it. Think about your young person. Look at so this table is just some games, because playing a game is a really good way of you're playing a game, you have a little bit of a chat. So I've just put some examples of one. The middle table has got bits on you can take away. And the last table has got loads of books and journals. Please don't take those away, but just take photographs if you want to buy them. There's some bits of information on that middle table about self-harm, because I will say to you that it's you might have children that are self-harming. It's very, very, very common. Very common. And it's very, very difficult, but actually, again, something to just keep talking about. Don't be afraid. Don't just say don't do it, because if they could not do it, they wouldn't be doing it, would they? So it's keep talking. There's a really good charity up there called Battle Scars. I've left information out. You don't have to talk about it. But these are the things, I think, that if we close down our children talking to us about the more serious stuff, then we might miss something. But even the little stuff's important. There was a really interesting, I can't remember who said it, you guys might have seen it yourselves, where somebody said if we don't listen to the small stuff, we miss the big stuff. So, you know, when my boys are rambling on about some football/basketball/game and I could not care less, I have to go, yeah, oh no, tell me more about that. Not all the time. We're not, you know, we're human, aren't we? But I think it's in those moments that if they get the picture, I think when they were younger, I was dreadful. I used to kind of just shut down the football talk because I just couldn't bear it. And then I learnt that actually I needed to engage with them on that stuff for them to engage with me on the other stuff. It's kind of that two-way street. So sorry if you've got to listen to endless hours about whatever it might be. And that moment, you know what they do, and there's lots of talk about this online. Your teenager won't talk to you. They'll say they're fine. You'll just be getting into bed. Be a little knock at your door. Mum, Dad, Gran, whoever it is. You want to talk now, don't you? That's because they've been chewing on it all that time, and they're brave enough now. They've just got that moment when they can say it. It's really, really hard. It's not always going to be, you're not always going to be able to do it, but just try and let them, especially our teenagers, because they're kind of processing it in a way where they feel like they're happy they can come and say it to you. My older son did it all the time, absolutely all the time, still does it now. He will wait until the last 5 minutes of my visit to him at university before he tells me the massive big thing that he's been trying to tell me. So that's about all I really want to say. I think that, I hope I haven't sounded like I'm lecturing you. I'm just kind of giving you my experience of working with young people and hoping that, you know, what I do know is, like I said, you all are different. You'll all parent differently. You'll have children that are different. They're all different ages. They're all at different stages. But one thing remains. We want them to be safe and we want them to feel heard. But we also want them to make other people feel safe. And I think that's what's become apparent in today's world, that perhaps those lessons are getting missed somewhere, that they're getting too much misinformation, so we have to be the voice of reason in the middle.
Thank you, Sarah. That's really helpful. I feel really affirmed. Wasn't that really helpful? It's really good to know we're not on our own in it. I think what's going to help me is that was all very sort of general,
yes,
and we want to get some specifics on it. So we're going to have a break. Let that sort of come back together. I've got some bits of paper and some pens. Have a look at the stuff and see what will help you. And if you've got a specific question, if you write it down, then nobody will know who asked it, and we can keep doing it. And I would love to film this, or we are filming it, and we'd like to put it out so that the people who couldn't come, because too many people are actually parenting right now and couldn't make it. So if you just write it down, no one will know who asked the question, and we can start digging into what if this and what about that. And actually, we all learn most from quite specific things. So a chance to read, to look at those activities and books and leaflets, to get more biscuits. And we'll come back in 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll be able to put some questions to Sarah, to Kate, and to each other, because you probably have some wisdom yourselves. Okay? Thanks. Welcome back. I'll tell you what's always reassuring is that when you've written a question down and somebody else has written that question down. So, if we'd all written it down, then you look at it and go, oh, we are stuffed. Nobody has any idea. But somebody's got the same question as you. Other people have already worked that stuff out. So that's a good sign, right? We've got questions in different sort of areas, and I'll try and unpack them. And if at any point we say something, you go, hang on a minute, and you want to jump in, then feel free to jump in, unless you want to remain anonymous, and then, wave at me. So, We've got some quite technical bits that we'll see if we can get through quickly, and then some more general things that some of these might need whole other evenings on that we might want to come back to. So how do you know what content they're accessing on TikTok and YouTube? Can you restrict this very much? And then we've got and something about the Wi-Fi. How do you set that? What are the main dangers of WhatsApp? Maybe slightly different. So let's think, how do we know what they're accessing on TikTok, YouTube? And we had a different question about the dangers of apps where there's disappearing content, which WhatsApp can do now. Messages just disappear after some hours, and Snapchat classically does that, but there are screenshots. So how do we know what they're up to, and what advice do you have about things where stuff disappears?
You don't. And as I think with the best will in the world, I said with my girls, okay, WhatsApp's got a higher age limit than you are, so therefore, if I'm going to let you have WhatsApp, then it's my right to check what's happening on it. That was my deal. I couldn't keep up with it. I mean, they can't keep up with it. One of them was saying in school the other day that they'd gone to football in the morning, they came back and there were over 1,000 messages. Well, you can't keep up with that. One of the things that I do with my girls is we use Google Family. I think iPhone has something similar. We're an Android family. But that limits the amount of time that they can have on different apps, which I think is really useful. Because one of my worries, particularly with things like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, is those algorithms and what it's going to end up feeding them. So one of the things that we do is we set a time limit on each app so that the algorithm just can't quite get a grip on them in the way that it might do if they were allowed unlimited access. Try to keep an eye on it, but you won't be able to keep up with it. I promised myself I was going to look, but I mean, I can't keep up with my own messages and emails, and mine theirs, and theirs are like 1 million times more than mine. It's about, I think, what Sarah was saying about keeping those channels of communication open, having those chats, making sure, and there are some more questions about that, about how we might do that with our children, but letting them know that they can talk to you and come to you when there's something that they're worried about is critical, and keeping those communication lines open. I don't know if you talked about it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And that's the whole thing I was meaning about. If you're sort of talking about the smaller stuff, then the conversations that you need to have about the harder stuff are always a bit easier. Again, so there's people asking here about sort of ages, about things, and everybody's on the WhatsApp. Or, I mean, again, it's up to you. I'm not here to tell you what to decide with your children. I think that if you're concerned, like somebody put about being bullied because you're the only person not on a WhatsApp group, again, that's up to you as a parent, and you might just say, it's a hard no, I still don't care. Or you might choose to say something along the lines of, okay, that's fine, but I'll be looking at that chat because... And it's about you also making them know that you trust them. It's not about not trusting them, maybe. You know, that care between you guys. It's not about not trusting you, darling. It's about the fact that there are people who don't know how to use phones properly. And their parents aren't helping them, and they don't really understand. So there might be things on there that you don't want to see and might upset you. So I'm just going to help you with that. So I guess it's how you frame it, isn't it? It's, you know, you are still... keeping them safe, but you're not kind of saying, because I don't trust you not to do the right thing. It's about the other people, because it's so open. You know, I know you'll be okay, but other people on there might not be, so we'll check it together. So but it's up to you, isn't it? It's absolutely up to you what you decide. But I do know what you mean about if they're the only one not on it, then, you know, maybe you'll feel comfortable allowing it, but with you on it as well, or you checking it every day.
We're in the middle of this at the minute, and I think what is helpful is to have allies, to know that you're not the only one, so making sure you know which other people out there are not letting their kids do this yet. And there are organisations out there, like smartphone-free childhood and things like that, and there's ways of getting in touch with each other, mostly online, ironically. So there are ways of having allies. Is it best to be the first or the last to have the phone and be made to wait? That's a really good question. That's the bit that we didn't have to work out, and I guess you need to know, do you trust your kids? But there are people I know who have like you can give them a smartphone and lock everything down and not give them access. They can't download an app. They can't do this. They can't get to TikTok. Eventually they find ways around it, but you can shut stuff down. Maybe we could do a different one of these just on the technical bits. I don't want to sit here and do you 10 minutes on settings on Apple versus Android, but that might be one of the things we need. At the end of this session, I want to write down, okay, what else do we need? And maybe that's the thing.
Yeah, I think the key thing is about teaching our children to manage risk, which we do perhaps more confidently in other areas of life. Like, you will know, you have 2 children and one of them will be absolutely confident to climb that tree, whereas the other one will be much more scared to do it. And you will help them and you will manage that risk and help them to take the next steps that they need to do. I was watching something online this week, somebody who's really into the tech stuff, and he said he thinks that we overprotect children in real life and underprotect them in their online life. And somebody else gave me this image, which I thought was really helpful, about you wouldn't take your 5-year-old and just dump them in the middle of Leeds City Centre and let them just explore. You would manage things gradually. So you might take them in and you go, on the bus with them to start with, and then you would introduce them to a small area. You might go into a shop together. Then when they get a little bit older, well, you go into the shop on your own and come back and I'll be outside waiting for you. Now you can go and explore maybe around the White Rose Centre. Now we'll learn how to go on a bus together, or you go on the bus and I'll meet you somewhere. So we're confident in doing that sort of thing in real life, and it's a similar thing I think that we need to do online. We introduce these things gradually. I think if what we do, like I think is tempting to do, is leave it, stop them doing anything at all, and then give them a phone when they go to high school, and suddenly they need that phone for their bus ticket. So then they're on the phone on the bus, and you don't know what they're doing, and then they come home from school, and you're not home from work yet, and they're not going to childcare anymore, and all of a sudden, they've got that amount of free time. Just sort of throwing them in, going, well, at 11 or when you go to high school, you can have a phone and then all the limits are off. We wouldn't do that in any other area of life. So it's about teaching them how to manage risk. And if we're talking to them while we're doing that, then you're already establishing those conversations so that when it does come to a more difficult conversation, you've got that inroad, you're used to having those sorts of conversations with them. And I think as well, my husband drives me nuts with this. Don't dismiss what they're doing online as just a load of rubbish, because TikTok is full of a load of rubbish, let's be facing it. There's some really funny stuff, cats doing all sorts of weird things on there. It's tempting to just go, I'm not interested in that, all that rubbish that you spend hours on your phone just doing. I used to go out and kick a ball around when I was your age, and that was much better for me. If you want, like Sarah says, if you want them to talk to you about the big stuff, you've got to listen to the little stuff as well.
Because to them, that is the big stuff right now.
It's always been the big
it's
stuff.
Always been the big stuff,
phrase,
yeah. I know what you mean.
I saw somebody say that. I didn't get it right earlier.
Somebody got it right.
Yeah.
And
it was about, it's always the big stuff to them. So it's that, yeah.
We had an interesting question related to this, teaching them that stuff. So I thought somebody really put their finger on it. I know how to cross the road and walk around Leeds City Centre. I don't yet know actually how to do this. I've kind of got my head around WhatsApp because grown-ups do it, but not Snapchat and TikTok. There's things I don't know. How do we teach them when we don't know yet? Right? That's a really good question. And
borrow a teenager.
Find somebody who does. But I think there's different ways of teaching. I remember this from being a teacher, and you guys have both worked in education. There's times when you teach a class, and the point of the teaching is to download knowledge from your head into their heads. Great, that's really easy. It's the stuff where you're learning together, though, is the stuff that they really remember. So I think it's going to be about, I'm guessing, it's doing it with them and saying, I don't know either. I've read this. What have you read? What? And the only way you do it, so when you get them to show you what they're doing on TikTok,
when they're looking at cats doing stupid things or whatever it is they're doing, when it is, or so that you then understand. How do you tell me how you show a message on Instagram, and what's this link in bio? What does that even mean? And get them to show you, and they love that actually. When they're young, when they're 15, they're not going to be so keen to show you. So get them while they're young. Don't leave it.
Build the habit.
Yeah, that's
okay.
That's good.
We're not doing AI today. Okay.
Should we sort of do the last couple about online and then just do a couple more?
Sure,
because
let's do that.
There's body image and a bit of sex ed almost there. So this one about when you found something dangerous online, about talking to your child. In a way, I think we've covered it a little bit because your absolute go-to, I know mine would be to go, what is this? And that's going to shut your average teenager down, your average child down in a minute, isn't it? So it's about trying to stay calm and have an appropriate response while you figure out what it is you are seeing or what they've been seeing. A lady just came over to speak then, children can be sent something that they've no idea what it is and they're just suddenly looking at this thing. Or they might have just led down the garden path and downloaded something they shouldn't have done. But I think it's about kind of trying to remain calm because you want them to keep coming back to talking to you. You want the next time something plops up in their phone for them to come and go, I don't know what this is. I didn't ask for it. So
how do we start that conversation?
Say, oh goodness,
you found the thing, they've gone to bed,
Yeah.
you've got the phone downstairs, finally, you've realised I maybe shouldn't let them go, you've looked at the thing, right, I will remain calm, I will try and sleep.
You won't sleep.
Then the next day, whenever you say, right, how do we start that conversation?
Again, I'm not trying not to tell parents how to parent, but for me, it would be about sort of trying to word it somewhere along the lines of, I found something on your phone that I'm sure shouldn't be there, and I'm a little bit worried about it. Can we have a look together and find out where it came from? Because, it looks like something...
How do you...
just stay...
If you use the microphone, we'll pick up the answers when we're on the video as well. Otherwise,
for the whole of Calverley,
it'll be no use.
I think. Talk to me about ...
I like that.
With a genuine curious. Talk to me about this thing that I've seen. Just where did that come from? With a sort of, and try not to be judgmental.
Talk to me about this thing.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this.
Talk to me about that.
What's going on? Have I missed the point? Is this all right?
Stay curious, because it might not be as bad as you think.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know we've talked trying to get the balance right about how we address these things in school as well. Things like sharing pictures of children nude and all the rest of it, and they get sucked into sharing inappropriate pictures of themselves. And it can be tempting to go down the really scary route about, before you know it, that's in Australia and, everybody's seen it. I think there's an NSPCC video that's called I've Seen Your Willy. Is that right?
I remember the title, but yeah.
I think that's what it's called, where he shares something that goes all around the school and ends up with his gran seeing it and he's like horrified. And that's light-hearted and it's done in an appropriate way. The danger is, I think, that we go so far and scare them so much into doing it that then if they do end up doing it, they're too scared to tell you. And as much as, we want to set high expectations for our children and we want them to live up to, good conduct online and behaving in a way that we have high expectations of them for, but allowing them to make mistakes and knowing that they can still come to you about that, getting that balance. I'm not sure I've got it right, but that's something I think to bear in mind. Stay curious and listen. If you want them to talk, you've got to listen, haven't you?
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Tell me about this.
Yeah, I was absolutely going to say that even when every fibre of your being is wanting to go, what on earth is this? Because most of us would want to, is try not to, because often it isn't as bad as you think, or it's come from somewhere else, or they haven't even seen it yet, and they might be desperately wanting to talk to you about it, might be frightened, might not know what to say. And then if you've created that conversation, if it happened on another occasion, they could come back to you and talk to you about it. And I suppose actually one of the things we haven't covered is modelling good behaviour yourself on your phone. Actually, guilty. Yeah, guilty, absolutely guilty. But our children learn by watching often, so modelling safe.
It's a lot easier to say
behaviour.
you can't have your phone in the bedroom if your phone isn't in the bedroom.
Yeah, and I think it's always explaining why to them, why you've made that decision, especially with the, why, not because you don't trust them or they're this, because of the other things that you're slightly concerned about.
Okay.
There was a question here about, I love this one, Oh, this definitely depends on what parent you are. What do you advise about staying over with a boyfriend or girlfriend? Perhaps we could all have a go at that one. I'm quite a...
That's the question, isn't
That's
it?
a question. That's a question. And I don't know who you are and what your standpoint is. So I'm not really sure. I think, again, you know when I said before about being really clear what your sort of family code is and what your desires are for the raising of your children and going from that. I wouldn't automatically go to the, oh God, no, because I think that again shuts down a conversation. We can all just think, well, if I don't let whoever it is stay over, nothing's going to happen. Wrong. They'll just find somewhere else to do it if that's what they're after. So I think if that's the question that's being asked of you, depending on your child's age, the question is, well, let's talk about that again. Well, tell me about that. Why do you want them to stay? You know, what might that look like? If this is a 12 or a 13 or a 14-year-old, it's a very different conversation to a 16 or 17-year-old, isn't it? But it's still a conversation.
And you need to know where you stand.
You need to know where you stand.
With your partner, if you're, if
Yeah.
there's two of you doing this, are you both on the same page?
Are you both on the same page? Are you going to
You've got
agree?
to have that awkward conversation first.
And again, it's another of those awkward conversations. Oh God! But actually, it's a lot better to have it. I know my younger son asked me if his girlfriend could stay, and she was 15 and he was 16, and I said, "Oof." And he said, "Oh, no, Mum, not that. And he looked absolutely horrified, like, oh, God, I don't know. He said, we just want to cuddle, we just want to spend the night with each other. And I said to him, right, I understand that I did trust him. And I said, but I want to speak to her mum. I want to speak to her mum because it's okay, I know you and I love you and I trust you, but she's 15, Luke, and I want to speak to her mum. So actually I spoke to both of her parents and we agreed together on what was going to happen there. So I guess for me, I'm not telling you that that's what you should do. I'll see what you say, but it's you've got to decide what sits with you. But the last thing I would do would be just shut it down, because then again, you're shutting down another really, really, really valuable conversation about sort of boundaries. And because then once we'd had that conversation, I could then follow it up with a kind of boundaries, consent, blah, blah, blah conversation, because it followed quite naturally. But if I'd just gone, oh my God, no, he'd probably never have come back to me again to ask me.
And it's a good conversation for them to have, right? If they want to do that, whatever it is that they want to do, they want to stay over with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and you say, okay, fine, then we need to have the conversations. They are motivated to have these awkward conversations with you. Yeah, it's interesting.
You, actually, you're onto a winner.
I suppose it occurs to me as well, it's worth knowing who I need to know who my team are, who's my crew. There are 2 or 3 grown-ups I know I can trust and go, what did you do? This is great that we can talk to each other. You probably don't all want to know what I'm going to agree with my wife about our daughter. But there is a couple of couples that we do that with, and work out who's your crew that you can go, what did you do and how does that work? And if you do want to thrash that out, then I've done this a few times, and you can always come and talk to us here offline,
I
not in a room of 20 people.
definitely ask my friends who've got kids who are a bit older than mine what to do. I would say as well, just beware, probably not, I recognise a lot of our parents, primary school age kids, great. Once they get to secondary school and you maybe not accessing that after school childcare, apparently that's when teenagers are having sex, is after school. You think it's at night, but it's not, because that's when they're unsupervised, the house is empty, that's when they're having sex, apparently. So,
I mean, it makes a lot more sense than before school, because those buses are early.
Yeah. So I just think, in my head, that, night time was the danger time. Apparently that's not so much.
Okay, good to know. All right, things you can take away from. Rachel, you've got a question that I want to make sure we can hear.
It's not so much a question, although you just pointed out the value of a Ring doorbell in that situation. But we had a different debate recently, but on the same topic, just around whether or not boyfriends might be allowed in the bedroom, for example. And we toyed with that and talked about it. But something else I did that I just found quite useful, if anyone else is wondering about similar things, is actually I went online. But I found a Mumsnet forum, and what was quite useful was people were having that conversation and putting different viewpoints across, and I was able to read that and then go, actually, do you know, that is how I feel about it, that is what I'm worried about, that doesn't bother me so much. And it was very much as well as you were saying about having the conversation, but it was just, I found it very useful for helping me to weigh up what I thought about it. So.
Because when you see things that align with how you feel, it's kind of, right, okay, yeah, that's sort of validation, isn't it, for how you're feeling about it. Yeah, that's what I mean about, yeah, you're all going to feel...
Mumsnet is good.
Mumsnet.
It's more use than Dadsnet. There is one. I don't know where we...
Honestly.
Dads do care. We are on this, right? It's not just me and Richard. Next question.
So we've got one about LGBTQ+, and we've got some here about body image.
We'll do the LGBTQ+ because you said it first, so we'll do that first. What was the question?
It's quite a detailed one, and we can go into the specifics of the different curricula. I mean, obviously we've got a particular curriculum that we use over at Calverley C of E, but different schools might have different curricula. It's quite common for schools in Leeds to use a scheme called You, Me, PSHE. That's the one that's been advised by the local authority, and the vast majority of schools use that. We definitely introduce the idea of lots of different types of families right from the very beginning. It's covered specifically in year 2 and then in year 4 and year 6, these sorts of, how we grow up and into our sexuality and our gender. It comes round each time at a different level when the children encounter it. But we have, LGBTQ families and parents in our community, and we, are very inclusive about that whole approach, right from in terms of how children experience it. In terms of teaching it in the curriculum, like I say, it comes up from year 2 and then in year 4 and then year 6. And
is that curriculum on the school website?
Definitely bits of it are.
Bits of it. Okay.
And we can definitely share more if parents want to see more of the detail. We've got lesson plans and things.
Okay.
I'm not sure what Parkside do, but I'd be surprised if they're not using the same curriculum, but
okay.
I don't know for definite. And
So
high schools, I've no idea.
So that was the first part of the question. We had what's the curriculum? Specifically about transgender stuff.
That would
that'll
probably
be on
come
that
up more
curriculum.
at secondary, but it's definitely on the curriculum. Yeah.
That comes up at secondary. How are schools supporting these students belonging to the community?
That'll depend on the
That
school.
varies enormously
Yeah,
school to
individual
school.
school your child is at, but there should be on the school website, there should be policies and information about how they support those students. I can only speak for Prince Henry's, that we had an awful lot of what we used to call drop-down days. So these were days when they came off timetable and did sort of PHSE stuff. Does everybody know what that is when I say PHSE? So it's all about relationships, and there was always a focus on LGBTQ+ for at least one of the lessons, appropriately set for whatever age group they were in. And we also had, run by moi, an LGBTQ+ support group, and had a whole week around the bringing in sort of people to speak to the children all about that. So that's what we did. So the actual support will vary from school to school, but obviously curriculum-wise, schools are duty-bound to teach.
There's been a controversy over this because before the general election, the Conservative government published some guidance, because schools have been asking for guidance about, what do we do when we've got children who are identifying as different genders? Do they join in, if we're still having separate gendered PE lessons? What happens with the toilets? Schools have been caught in the middle with parents where children have wanted to be identified with different pronouns. Are the parents... Do they have to give permission to do that? Are the parents informed about it? Does that put the child at risk? Because that can be an issue. And schools have been crying out for guidance from government. They did publish some just before the general election to mostly sort of... Schools weren't very happy with what had been said. It didn't feel very supportive. We haven't had anything since. So it's still a very tricky issue for schools, I think, in knowing how to address that, and national guidance would be welcomed.
Yep.
because otherwise it puts schools in the middle of a very difficult conversation.
Schools are in a difficult place. Support will vary. This was how do I educate my child, even though it's all new to me. This is a huge part to be doing this alongside your kids,
together
alongside
again.
your crew, the other grown-ups who are going on with this. And we're still working this out here at church, and we're trying to be quite active about exploring it. So we know a little bit. How much does school know? Schools don't know that much about your kids unless your kids choose to tell them.
Absolutely, yeah. If they're not told, then they won't know. And there is that awkward situation where I had this, where students would tell me and would want to be using a different name in school, but absolutely did not want their parents to know. I think this is probably something we could almost come back to, because it's a whole subject topic on its own. But needless to say that, yes, schools need much more support and guidance from the government about what they teach and don't teach.
Okay.
Parents are clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
we haven't fixed that.
No.
Let's not fix girls and body image.
Girls and body image, yes.
And to be fair, boys and body image, but in a different way.
Yeah, and boys and body image as well.
What's the question?
How can you reassure, encourage healthy eating and exercise without making a big deal about weight? Absolutely, either way. So I think the thing is not to use... it's careful of your words, so never using the words diet or, weigh more, weigh less. It's health. Always talking about healthy lifestyle, healthy eating. Those are the phrases. Even if you have a child who you're encouraging for one reason or another the other way, so that you're not commenting, because it is very difficult, isn't it? I can remember that. My dad called me dumpling, which was lovely, which was because I was chubby. I still remember that now, and I'm 55. So we do want to encourage our children to be healthy, to eat healthily. But we don't want to draw a lot of attention to weight either way. So it's finding ways around that. Also kind of keeping the conversation open. And not, again, if they kind of come to you and say, oh, I feel like I'm to this or to that, well, talk to me a bit more about that. What makes you think
that's
that?
good. So come back to that curiosity.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Curiosity,
Say more.
That's interesting. If we and we have a tendency, don't we, to shut it down because we don't believe it. They'll come to us and go, "Oh,
don't be daft."
I'm worried, but don't be daft. You're not. Well, they've just told you they think they are, so they feel that.
And they must really feel it if they're saying it to you.
Absolutely. One thing that I've really, really learned as a parent, and I probably learned it a little bit late, is to just stop and listen to what they've just told me and not just shut it down. Because the minute you go, no, you've shut it down. And just because you're looking at your beautiful child, not imagining for 1 minute that they could ever think that, doesn't mean they're not feeling it.
And
so
I suppose,
acknowledge it, acknowledge what they've said. And if you're worried about them underweight or overweight, it's just go about it the healthy perhaps you could do it with them. Again, it's always better if you're doing it as a team rather than sort of suddenly they're sat wondering why they've got a plate of salad and you've got something else. Do it as a family or do it as you and them. Make it a sort of joint effort. Talk about it.
And I suppose they're always learning from what we're modelling.
Yeah.
Are you always
it's interesting
dieting?
When you think
about... Are you
about,
always on the scales? Who are you tutting at on the telly?
If you're a mum with girls and boys, but we know that it's more girls, and you are constantly talking about being on a diet, not liking what you look like, losing weight, their ears will hear all that. And they won't hear the positive stuff, that's what they'll hear. My oldest son, worried me because during COVID and after COVID, when he was quite badly bullied, he didn't eat. And that's how his emotional response was to not eat. But I think you've got girls, so I'm going to hand over to you in a minute. It's sometimes a little bit different, but I especially think you've got to be mindful of what you're saying. So when I go and do to the gym, I'm going, because I want to feel healthier. I want to feel healthier. It's just all it is a different focus on the words, really, but then acknowledging how they feel.
And we can't all have trips to Scandinavia every summer and be in saunas, but we don't. You've got to watch which naked bodies we see. We don't see very many. We're British people. That's not what we do, right?
And that's the whole.
That's not. But now that they've got the world in their pockets, the naked pictures that they do see are of people who work out professionally, right? Amelia
I
pointed
think
out to
it's
me,
another
why do the men on the underpants packets all not look like you, Daddy? And they didn't all look like that when I was 15, and I'd have been terrified to think, have I got to have a six-pack? There isn't one there. It's frightening for all of us. So we've got like coffee table books of people's naked bodies that occasionally come out, and you can see them, and they're of every different size and shape, and being like, is that, yeah, no, could they, at some point...
See, my daughter would be horrified if we did that.
But you've got to find some way of I think that's marginally better than sitting down with our little ones and watching Naked Attraction.
I think it's another example of where they're what they learn about in school and what they can recite in a lesson is there's a huge gap between what they're then doing in real life. So they'll teach them about the Eat Well plate or whatever. I think that's gone out of fashion now. But we'll teach them about having a balanced diet and the importance of eating vegetables. And they go yeah, and they design their little plates at school and they make their meals in DT food and then they go home and eat a pot noodle. And you can't get them to eat anything else. There's this just a reality gap, isn't there? Every time it comes up at school where we've had an incident of online misbehaviour, and they sit there in beautiful angelic faces and tell you all about how they should, respect this and not say that and then they go off online and do it anyway. It's just talk to me about why you did that. Talk to me about what you were thinking at the time. Talk to me about how that made you feel. Talk to me about how you think that might make somebody else feel. Tone of voice in a text message is terrible, isn't it? We talked about that at school this week. How something that you might laugh about, you might have a joke with somebody in the playground at school and go, oh, you daft thing, oh, what on earth did you say that for? And you'll have a little laugh about it and move on. It's fine. Those same exact words in a text message can then be interpreted in a completely different way. And they get it. They sit there in front of you and go, yes, miss, absolutely, we really understand. And they still go away and do it. So it's just coming back to it, I think, time and time again. I think that was something that came up for me as well. It's like, when do we introduce this stuff? And a few people have asked that as well. I think before they experience it, it's really hard to know, isn't it? For one child, they need to know about what they might, whether they might see pornography. I mean, I did speak to my girls about that the other day because it came up. So I was, children have seen pornography at this age. And I said, have you ever seen anything like that? No, we've never seen. And I believe them. I don't think they have. So mine girls are 12 and 14, and I don't think they've ever seen anything other than maybe a naked picture. But it's horses for courses, isn't it? What's right for them, it doesn't mean that I don't want them to know about it before it might come up. And we have, certainly in school, we have a spiral curriculum. So, we'll start talking about things like keeping safe online, sharing passwords, not letting you, where your physical identity, physical location data stuff is, and we do that. You think, well, but that's a bit early, and then they, when it comes up in their real life, will they remember that that's what we taught? That because we come back to it each year on another layer, and the next year it's sort of another layer. So you're revisiting things. I think just because you've maybe talked to them about it once doesn't mean you're not going to need to talk to them about it again.
Yeah, you can't have the talk. You have to have the talks. Again and again and again. We're getting close to time. Is there any question that's in an area that we haven't covered at all that you can see on the table there?
I was just going to add, actually, well, that was what you were saying. I think I'll go back to what I said before. Please don't think you've got to sit down for like an entire day. It is just little moments, and that'll build that kind of, that relation up between you and then it'll become easier. One of the things I was just going to say about body image is health, really good role models. So instead of them sort of looking up to some kind of skinny model-esque influencer, let's think about the really positive sporting role models, or anybody that's a really positive role model that you can use, that they might look up to, because they do, don't they? We can't get away from that. So can we find people that are a positive, good role model? So you're not just saying, well, don't look at all that online. You again, look together. Oh, let's look and see who we can find. Oh, look at this person. She does this or he does that. You're joining them in their world, because I think that's what we have to do. That's what I really want to sort of say at the end. We don't want to, but we do have to join them in their world to keep them safe and to know what they're doing. And actually, I can tell you all about Spurs and Leeds United should you ever need to know.
That's really good.
Oh, and Marvel films.
Yeah.
I think just the last thing that I made a note of that hasn't really come up, but I just think is worth saying is protect their sleep. Don't let them have access to their phones in their bedrooms overnight, somehow or other, whether that's, you have it on an app that there's a curfew and it shuts down, or you make them charge their phones outside of their bedroom. Children's bodies are still, and their brains are massively developing, and they need uninterrupted sleep. And the number of children that I've encountered, I mean, this is I haven't particularly encountered it at Calverley, but at my previous school, we picked up messages that had been going on between them at like 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. It's really common. And like Sarah was saying, that ability to sort of escape that. It's not always bullying, but just that constant whittering on about, what's going on. Sometimes it is bullying. But yeah, children need their sleep. Protect their sleep with everything that you've got, if that's the only thing you can manage to do.
All these awkward conversations are so much harder with somebody who's knackered, right? So all of us need our sleep. I read some interesting research last week that kids will get their best grades, A-levels, like SATs in America, if they've been getting about 7.5 hours sleep. Their mental health will be best if they're getting about 9 hours sleep. You have to choose what you want to maximise for. A certain amount of low-grade anxiety running through your teenage years apparently will increase your grades at significant cost to your mental health, but certainly plenty of sleep. Have you got any more questions that we didn't get to yet or that have occurred to you since? We'll try and get you out. And are there any other topics that you're going to want to come back to? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put the paper and the basket back at the back on your way. If there's a whole area that we've glanced at or not covered in enough depth, you think, oh, that thing, or whatever, let us know, and we could do this again. So I'll put the basket and the paper back. Lizzie? There are 3 different ones. Take one of each of these. They're on the table at the back next to where the basket will be. Thank you so much for coming. Huge thanks to Kate and to Sarah. Couldn't have done this without you. Can we show our appreciation? It's been lovely having you here. Loads of this stuff is what we might have done on any old Sunday morning anyway. You're always welcome to show up and ask questions, and I will answer them, and they don't have to be about the Bible. Many of these we have done on Sunday mornings. So it'd be lovely to see you, but otherwise that's as much of a plug as you get from me. Amelia, question? No, I've got something to say. You got something to say, okay?
It's nothing bad. I was just saying, keeping a child safe, obviously I'm not a mum, but I have had experience, and obviously I do work across a play academy, so I do know some of the kids. But when you were talking about that NSPCC video, I remember watching one when I was about 8, 9 years old, and I can still remember it word for word. It was, it's called Pantosaurus, if anyone has watched it. Yeah, just wanted to mention that because it really helped me and my brother.
Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next time if there is one. Good night and God bless.